Everybody, welcome back to Watch and Carry. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to use double-sided glue tape to apply your colored filters to your Casio projects. So the particular watch I'm going to be working with today is a Casio AE1200 with the black case. A friend sent this to me and asked if I could do a colored filter mod. He particularly wants a green filter here in the analog clock, and that's it. So I've done a lot of these projects before and I've filmed them, but I've not done one where I show you how to use the double-sided tape. So that's why I thought I'd go ahead and film this for you today. If you're curious how to get to this step where you have the module and the masking in front of you, I'd recommend checking out some of my other videos. Very simple to do, and I explain it there. The particular filter we're going to be using is off of Lee's again. This is what you call a Swatchbook. It's basically their sample pack. This particular filter I have larger sheets of because it's quite popular, and this is Fern Green. Okay, if you want to know where you can buy this filter, I will put that link in the description below. Okay, and then of course the tape. So I used to use super glue liquid in the past. Been okay with it. It gets a little bit messy just by the fact that it's a liquid. It's a little bit harder to prevent the liquid from kind of leaking into the visible areas of the masking and your filter. And if you want to reverse it, take off the filter, change the color, or if you messed up and you want to redo it again, very hard to remove super glue once it's been applied. So that's why I decided to go with this tape. This is not by Super Glue. This is by T-Rex brand. Picked this up from Walmart for about $5 or $6, so about the same price as the Super Glue liquid, and used it for the last 3 months now and just found it so much easier to work with. Much more precise, very little mess, and reversible. Okay. So once you have your tape, the other things that you're going to be needing are probably like a hobby knife I have found very useful. Your lug tool over here. Okay, a pair of tweezers can sometimes be helpful. Okay, usually for applying filters, I use these plastic ones that don't have any knurling or threading on the tips, just because those can add some scratches to the fragile filter. And then I use a fine pair of scissors to cut my glue tape off. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. You'll already notice I have my filter here on the left, and my tools already laid out. So if you need to take some time, go ahead and just pause the video. But once you get to this step, what we're going to need to do is take out or cut our strips of super glue tape. Okay, or actually what we're going to do is we're going to start with the filter first. So we want to measure our filter and be sure that we have the right size. So I'm going to take my tweezers here, and for now let's work on this gray background because I'm not cutting yet. This will be a little bit more pleasing to you guys rather than the light reflection off the white there. Okay, you're going to take your masking, you're going to flip this over. Okay, we're going to be putting our filter here over this circle. So we're going to take our Lee filter here and just kind of place it over, drop it in there, and kind of move it around and see if our filter is the right size. So what do I look for with the right size here? So obviously your filter is going to need to cover at least the entire area of the cutout, and it should go even a little bit further because you want to have space to apply your tape. So I don't really have too much space left to right on this strip. This is just a recycled piece of filter that I'm using. Unused, but it was off of another project, so I don't want to waste cutting another one. I don't have too much space left to right, but it does cover the cutout for that masking, which is fine. But I have plenty of space up and down. So this is where I'm going to be applying my glue, is actually here to the top and here to the bottom. The glue tape, I should say. So once you've figured out that you have the right amount of filter, you kind of have to get the size dialed in. So what I like to do is kind of lay it down loosely over that. Okay. Take like a thin Sharpie here. Okay, I'm going to take my lug tool and just gently pin that filter at the top so that way it doesn't move when I, oops. This filter is so delicate, it jumps around a lot. So lay that down. Okay, put it in place. Okay, pin it at the top. And then draw a line at the bottom where you're going to cut out. So I like to make a little diagonal here at the bottom. Okay, to follow the diagonal of the masking. Okay, and then just a line here at the top like so. Okay, and you'll notice I leave a little bit of room here at the top between the Sharpie mark and the cutout where I'm going to apply my super glue. The top part I don't have to worry about because it's within the area for the masking, so we can just leave that as is. Okay, go back to your plastic tweezers here. Okay, we're going to lift up on this and then take our scissors and cut this out. Okay, which is good. Put that there. Okay, and then we're going to cut out that little diagonal part that we had also marked, like so. So now we got our filter here. Okay, we're going to go back to our masking here, kind of put this down. The filter, you notice, is covered with some dust, but right now I'm not worried about that. I will clean that up at the very end before I reassemble the watch. And we'll put our filter down and just recheck our cutouts to make sure that we have what we need. So yeah, we are covered left to right here, and up and down I still have a lot of room where I can apply that tape. Now, the amount of area here that you're going to be applying your super glue tape, or your super glue tape, you want to kind of keep that measurement in your mind. So it's a relatively thin strip. I would say probably, I don't know, eyeballing this is no more than maybe 1 millimeter. Okay, in width, 2 millimeters, and then here another 2 millimeters at the bottom. And so in my mind, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. That's about how thick I want to make my cuts on the super glue tape. Now, here's where, here's specifically why I wanted to make this video, is to kind of avoid some of the problems I've had when I initially started working with this. So initially what I would do is I would kind of do all those steps that I showed you, kind of go to my tape, and then I would say, okay, I need about, 1 or 2 millimeters. So I'd lift up on this tape. Now this tape has a sticky back end here and a protective white backing here. The tape itself is actually clear. Okay, so kind of lift up like this. And then I would take my scissors. I'm using a really fine pair of scissors. These are very similar to Victorinox. And I would try to cut a very thin strip off this glue. So I'm going to do that here and kind of show you what happens when you try to do that. Okay, so we've cut our thin strip. Okay, now you'll take a look at the scissor here, and you'll notice what's happened. Okay, because the strip is so thin, the tape ends up folding on itself in the scissor. Okay, now the white protective backing on that glue tape is fine. Obviously, that's paper, but the relatively sticky and more flexible tape just ends up sticking to my scissors here. Okay, so this kept happening. Now, the solution to that would be to cut a thicker strip. But again, we're working with such a small area in that masking that you don't want to make it too thick. Eventually, that strip of glue tape is going to have to be thin. So let's clean this off. Let me show you kind of what I figured out. You can see here just how easily that glue comes off. So very easy to remove it on your projects if you don't like it. So we'll remove that off, probably clean these scissors afterwards. Okay, and let me show you kind of how I solved this problem. So now we have to go to our chopping board. Okay, this one in particular is a poly cutting board. It's best if you can get a darker colored cutting board, just because the tape is clear. It makes it easier on the ice to see how fine your cuts are. I don't like to use wood though, because the wood obviously is going to have more pieces of it that can easily come off compared to the poly board. So if you can find a darker colored poly board, I think that's what would be best. We're going to grab our tape and we're going to grab our hobby knife here. And I like to take my lug tool right here. Okay, this is what you would use to on the spring bars when you're installing and uninstalling straps. Okay, Then we're going to go to our tape, and this time I'm going to cut a much thicker strip. So let's zoom in here. A lot of white in this video, which is, I'm sure, hard on your eyes, so I apologize for that. So I'm going to cut maybe, was this about an inch? Okay. Off that. And then I'm just going to stick it here right on my board. Okay. Now I'm going to trace the perimeter of this tape, because when I remove the white protective backing, I want you to be able to see it on camera where I'm cutting. Otherwise, it'll just look like I'm working on a cutting board for no reason. So I'm gonna kind of roughly mark here the cutting area. Okay. Great. So now that we have that, we're going to bring our masking back into the picture here. So I'll put that right here. Okay. And again, we're just going to be cutting a strip that's thin enough to apply to the top and to the bottom. So very thin, probably about no more than 1 millimeter. So the back of this sticky tape now is facing down, so it's really stuck there. I can't move that. The top, again, has that protective white backing, so that's going to be fine. I'm going to take my lug tool here, kind of hold down at the very top to kind of pinch down on that glue. And then I'm going to cut my millimeter strip here with my hobby knife. Okay, obviously use a brand new blade. Safer to work with a sharp blade than a dull blade, and just kind of draw cut across. Okay, you might have to do it, 1 or 2 times, like so. Okay. Then what we can do is try to lift up on this thin strip. You can use a pair of tweezers, you can use your fingernails. What I have found the easiest and the cleanest to do without getting tape all over your fingers is just taking your hobby knife, turning it sideways. And because that's so thin, it is great at lifting up on the tape. So let me zoom in here so you can see. Okay, kind of like that. I'm going to kind of push down on that so it kind of lifts up the whole thing. Okay, so in this case it didn't come off clean. I have the protective backing of that tape, but the tape itself is still there on the board. You can see it kind of reflecting in the light. So I'm going to put this tool away. Let's grab a pair of tweezers actually here. This is a metal pair that has teeth on it. Great for grabbing delicate things here. We're going to kind of lift up on that strip. There we go. So let me kind of show you what that looks like. There you go. So there's our super glue tape, and you can see just how thin I was able to make that cut by using the hobby knife versus the issue that I had when I used the scissor. All right, so now that you've got your strip laid out, you want to apply this to a different part of the board here. So I'm going to lay it down lengthwise, and I'm going to kind of use my hobby knife to help here. Very useful tool that I'm finding out, not just for cutting. Okay. I'm going to lightly tap down on that glue strip tape right there. Okay, let's make another Sharpie mark here so you can kind of track on camera where I'm cutting. I'm going to try to make it visible for you, but I don't know how visible it will be. So there you go. There's our strip. Okay, then we'll go back to our lug tool here. And I want to cut a length that's wide enough to fit that filter. Okay, so not too wide. Just going to eyeball it. Looking at that filter now, I'm going to push down on one end with my lug tool here. So that way when I draw my blade, it doesn't bring the whole filter down with it. Okay, so I'm going to tap down a little bit so that the glue stays attached to the board. And then I'm going to just draw cut here once. Okay, set that piece to the side, and then another strip here and draw cut again. So now I have 2 smaller strips that I've cut away from the larger strip. Okay, let's move that to the side here. Now let's bring in our filter, or bring in our masking. What's the best way to do this? Try to get some good light in here. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, so we're going to be applying the tape here to the top, here to the bottom. Now, when you apply the tape, initially what I did was I put the tape very close to the cutout, this circle, okay? And then I would apply the filter. What I end up finding out is that if you put the tape really just up to the edge of your cutout, whichever window you're working with, and then you push down on the filter to adhere it to the glue tape actually expands just a tiny amount when you push down, obviously. So the problem with that is it's going to expand in all directions. And what I noticed was oftentimes the tape ended up expanding into the filter in the visible area of this masking. And so when you reassemble the watch, you can obviously see the filter, but you'll also see the glue tape kind of showing itself from the top and the bottom and the edges of that cutout. So what that told me is I need to apply the glue tape just a little bit shy of that cutout, just like maybe a millimeter away from the edge. And so you want to do that with any of your projects, regardless of which window you're working with on the masking. Okay, so let's go ahead and show you how to apply this. Again, the tape can be hard to lift up here, so I'm going to take my hobby knife with one hand, lug tool with the other, turn it sideways with my hobby knife, and lift up on that first strip that we applied. I put a little bit of pressure once I have the tape on top of the blade to kind of stick it to the blade. And then that way, I have that strip that I'm working with. You see how easily that comes off? Just so much easier to do this with the blade. Then I'm going to go to the top here, put it about a millimeter shy of the edge of that cutout, push with my lug tool on one end, and apply the tape. Sometimes what you can do is you can kind of roll your hobby knife away from the tape, and that will cause it to unravel from your blade because you're securing it here on one end with the lug tool. Okay. Then before I press down on that glue, I like to step back and say, okay, is it away from the edge? Yes. Is it wide enough? Well, it is. I could probably stick my filter onto there, but I want a lot more area for this tape to cover. And so luckily the tape can be spread within reason. So I'm going to hold down my masking with my lug tool on the left here. I'm just going to just gently spread this tape to the left and to the right. Okay. Like so. It's not going to move a whole lot, and I'm using the back tip of my hobby knife right now, but it's enough for me to get this spread out. If your glue tape is too close to the edge, this is a great time to just leave it there and kind of push it away from that edge with your hobby knife, okay? And then once you think it's wide enough, you can go ahead and lightly tap down, and then it will adhere over there. Okay, so hopefully that's visible for you guys. Let's go to the next piece here. Okay, that looks good. Away from the edge, and we'll spread out this tape. Sometimes it helps if you push your tool a little bit gently in the center of the masking so it applies some pressure, so that way when you're spreading out this tape, you don't, rotate the whole thing around. Okay, and obviously don't push too hard on this tool because you don't want to crack the masking. All right, so we have our glue strips laid down. So very, very easy to do. Let me bring this up in the light so you can show. To me, this is super exciting when I figured out this method of applying tape. This might seem so basic, but the number of projects that I do, figuring out something that makes the work so much easier is just, I don't know, it's very satisfying to me at least. So here's our masking here, and here's our tape. Now, if your filter is a little bit wider on the left and the right, by all means, you can apply more tape. Honestly, I think that's a little bit of overkill. I've never had any of these filters come off of the tape. So to me, 2 is more than enough here. Okay. Now let's go back to our filter. Let's get that prepped now. Zoom out a little bit. Okay. All right, so here's our filter. Let's try to get this cleaned up. So I'm going to take a clean microfiber cloth here on the back. These are just some stains that won't remove in the laundry. Okay, I'm going to lift up on this filter again using my plastic tweezers. Don't pinch too hard because you don't want to kink the filter. Okay, now before I rub with the microfiber cloth, I'm going to give this a quick blast with my duster. This is just to make sure that we don't grind any larger dust particles into the filter itself. Okay, then I'm going to put this down. Okay, I like to work on a flat surface when rubbing away, when rubbing on the filters, just so that you don't put any wrinkles in them. Okay, we're going to turn this over like that, and just kind of give it a light pass over there. Okay, now I'm going to flip this over again, and do it like that. Okay, then I'm going to move to my filter check area, which really is just a piece of black paper. That gives me some contrast in the light above my work area, so that way I can see if there's any dust that's showing up here or any fingerprints that I missed. Okay, so there's still a little bit here on the top. So sometimes what I need to do is actually turn the filter on its side, support it on one end, and then just be a little bit more aggressive with the wiping here. Try not to use your nail, by the way, when you're pushing down on the filter, because again, that's going to put some kinks in the filter that will show up when you reassemble. Okay, flip this over. Do the same thing again. Now, one thing you'll notice when you're doing this, the filter, after you're wiping it down, is actually going to be electrically charged a little bit. So you're going to have some static. So it might stick to your tools, to the masking where you don't want it to. So just be aware of that. And the microfiber I'm using here is like sunglass quality, right? You don't want to be using microfiber towels for that from the car, just because they're a little bit more abrasive. Okay, so that looks better. Okay, now once I've gotten those smudges out, I'm going to bring it to my black parchment paper here. Look for any dust. Give it a quick blast. So that looks pretty good to me. And then I'm going to hold this in place. I don't want to drop this back down because it's going to attract more dust. Okay, we're going to bring in our masking here. Okay, and then you can just easily lay down the filter. For this, I like to use my lug tool again. Okay, but I'm going to use the wider part of that just to limit the amount of pressure that I'm placing on this filter. I'm going to just gently lay it down on top of the masking, but I'm not going to press it in yet. Okay, so at this point you can kind of adjust this where you need to go. Go back to the thin part of my lug tool here. Okay, make sure you have enough space here left to right. Okay, that looks good. And then the top and the bottom, check for that. Looks like we're a little bit too far on the bottom here. Just kind of move this filter up just a tad and readjust. Okay, and that looks good. Clearance left to right looks good, and up and down looks good, and it's touching all parts of that glue. So once it's there, you can go ahead and just gently press down. I'm using the wide portion of my lug tool here. You'll notice that this part of the glue right now looks still clear. This is black. So it tends to get black when you press down on it, which is just the glue spreading underneath the filter. And we'll repeat here for the top as well. Okay, all right, so now we've applied our filter. Let's go to our module. Okay, we're going to give this a quick blast again. Okay. Now when you're blasting from the back portion of the masking, it's okay to be a little bit more aggressive because you're just pushing down on the filter towards the glue. But if you do it from this end, you want to be a little bit more delicate, obviously, because you don't want to blow that filter off. And I like to go at an angle. Okay, look in the light, check for any more dust or fingerprints. Okay, that looks good. Go to our module, give this a quick blast as well. And let's assemble this and see how it looks. Now, with this world time, the masking, if you kind of move it around enough, it finds the grooves of the module beneath it. So once you found that groove in there, you can kind of lift it up like this. And then what I like to do is turn up, down, left, and right. And what I'm checking for is I want to make sure that I don't see any of this gray color display when I lift up like this, or to the right, or to the bottom, or to the left. If you see that, that means your filter is probably not cut wide enough, and I would redo it. It may not bother most people because from this angle, it looks like the filter is fine. But if the filter is too small, most people don't look at their watch straight on. They're going to look at it at an angle, and you're going to constantly see that bare display being shown in these upper areas if you don't have it cut large enough. So that's why I do that. And then I'm also checking in the light for any dust or any fingerprints, any kinks that I might have put in the filter. I'm also checking at this point. It will be very obvious. The light will refract off of it very easily, but this looks perfect. Okay, and so that's pretty much it with our project. The filter goes on, and then you reassemble the watch as you've seen in my other videos. So very, very easy to do, very reversible. Again, as I mentioned, it's as easy as me pushing down on this filter and removing it off. The tape is very strong, but it's not so strong that you can't use like a pair of tweezers to remove it off. Some people have asked me, you know, I'm going to be using this for active things like sports. I'm going to be taking this, you know, swimming laps at the pool. I'm going to be taking this skiing or hiking. Is this glue going to hold up? So far, yes, I haven't had any customer or me personally on my own watches. I haven't had this glue fail on me. I've used this in very humid environments. I've used this in very cold environments. Never ever had an issue. The only issue I could probably see is if you have somebody that's doing a battery change and they take the case back off their watch and for some reason the whole thing, the module, the masking falls off. Maybe the filter might come off, but I don't think it's any less adhesive than if you were using super glue liquid itself. So for me, this just adds so much more convenience. I think it's more cost effective. This thing has lasted me 3 months. For the same amount of work that I've done in 3 months previously with super glue liquid, I've probably had to go through maybe 2 bottles on similar projects. So much more standardized because you can control the proportions of your tape that you're applying. And again, reversible. So much easier to take this filter off if I messed up, or if it's my own watch and I don't like the design a few months from now, I can change it out very, very easy. So I think that kind of covers everything. Hopefully you guys picked up some stuff. Again, this is probably super self-explanatory. I mean, most people will know how to put tape on something, but hopefully what you found out with like applying it delicately, getting the strips away from the edges, that's kind of more the important parts I wanted you to take away from this video. So if you like this video, if you could comment or subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated, as well as to my Instagram in the description. And any comments or tips, please also share. And as always, have fun, and I will see you guys on the next one.